So for the method section that's coming up, I'll talk about the content requirement, experimental details, APA requirement, and the homework section for turn it in. All right, writing. We got a method section draft that's coming up. It's going to be the first draft that's due. It's going to be the first piece of writing that you do for your big final research paper. So I mentioned we were going to write it piece by piece, and today we're going to go over what goes in the method section so we can take you from this, not quite to this, but definitely get you to this point over here. So again, if I told you right now, go write a method section, you have all the info you need. That would probably be you over the next week, but we're going to change you into this by taking a look at what a method section is all about. So the method section, if you're thinking about the method section as any other form of writing, any other book that is out there, the method section is best compared to a recipe from a cookbook. So you are literally writing a recipe for the experiment so that somebody else could read that recipe, and much like a cookbook, instead of baking a cake, they can bake a very nice experiment. So the method section, you need to put in enough detail so that other people can redo or replicate your study. So that is your guiding light when you're writing your method section. You want to put in enough steps, details, information, so that somebody reading your experiment can say, oh, that's very interesting, I want to redo it. I have all the steps and all the ingredients that I need to. So what are the sections that you need for your method section? Well, the first one is your subjects. So here we have a published method section. This is from one of my publications. And you'll notice that it has the methods. First thing it's got is the subjects up there. That's your first ingredient, right? So much like you have an ingredients list in a recipe, you got an ingredients list for your method section. The first one is subjects. Sometimes you'll see subjects, sometimes you'll see participants. You can use either one. There's trends towards people using one or the other. It doesn't really matter. Anybody familiar with APA will understand it. That's your first section. Next section, also a list of your ingredients. Stimuli, apparatus, materials, or measures. Once again, you can pick two of those. So stimulus and apparatus is a very popular one. Materials and apparatus, stimuli and measures. You can even get by with just one, such as materials. But definitely this is outside of the people you're using, what else are you using for your experiment? And then the last one is procedure, and these are your ingredients. This is your step-by-step instructions on how to put the experiment together. So we got what you need in order to do it, your ingredients, and then we got how do you put it all together so you can stick it in the oven and come out with a great experiment. All right, so that's your basic breakdown. Let's take a look at it in a little bit more detail. So you're going to have to write a section on subjects or participants, whatever you want to call it. For anything that you're writing that you don't have the details for, the details can be found there in a PDF that has your method section information. So just to make you aware, this PDF is now available in Canvas, in the resources section for the research paper in the files. So this is your supplemental information. This has all the information that you need that you wouldn't necessarily know. So 191 subjects, 36 males, 155 females, 24.2 years of age, 5.8 is the standard deviation, and all subjects participated in the experiment as part of the P211 class. For the stimulus and apparatus, all the lists were taken from Roediger and McDermott. All the lists were associated with a non-presented word. So again, it just has all these details, 6 lists, 15 words per list, and then where you can find additional information for those PowerPoints. And then in terms of the procedure, subjects were tested either individually in pairs or groups of 3. And additional information, recall competence rating period was 2 minutes long. And also how you will have to include details for the procedure from your memory of the experiment. For example, how were subject responses recorded. So this will give you all that supplemental information that you probably wouldn't have access to without this. And then also, this is your bare minimum of what needs to go into the method section. So definitely all this information will find its way into your method section somewhere, but also this is necessary, but it's not sufficient. So you will have to include details, especially for the procedure, from your memory of the experiment. So it's not all outlined here, especially for the procedure, it's just the details that you might not have been aware of. All right, so that's available on Canvas. Download that to help you write your method section. So for example, this is first going to come into play for the subjects, for the subject section. You need to indicate how many subjects, right? You need to let them know. Was it 10? Was it 20? Was it 30? Was it 100? Was it 142? So there's no way that you can know this number because I've included all the data from this section of the course and from previous sections of the course. So that is available in the method section information. I believe it's 181, including everyone here. So that is included there. So make sure that as you're going through, you're referencing this for the information that you don't have, because you need to report the number of subjects that you used. You need to report their average age. It makes a difference whether you're using, in a recipe, whether you're using fresh apples or dried apples, right? So same with, like, it's kind of not, I'm gonna push the metaphor, fresh people or dried people, right? The average age, if you're using elementary school kids, your results are gonna be different than young adults. Your results are gonna be different than elderly adults. You have to report average age. You have to report how many females, how many males. That makes a difference, or could potentially make a difference as well. And then other information that you need is included in the method section information. So one of the guides that you can use for your for this method section for the first time is that if it appears in this method section information, it's got to appear somewhere in your draft. So in this method section information, you'll see that all the students were part of the this P211 class. That has to go in there. The students were students here at IUSB. That has to go in there. So again, these details about what goes in, be sure that you check that method section information, but we definitely need number, average age, females versus males. So that's the first section, subjects. After subjects comes stimuli and apparatus. So stimuli and apparatus, this is again your list of ingredients, and this is again letting the person know enough detail so they can redo the experiment. So things like number of lists. It makes a difference if you only did one list versus 6 lists, like what we had, versus 26 lists, which is way too many lists. But anyways, we need to let them know we had 6 lists. Each list had 15 words, right? So the words per list, it makes a difference. So we only had 3 words per list. Just about everybody in here would have scored 100%. If we had 60 words per list, your recall ability would have been much lower. Your percentages would have been much lower. So we need to know how many words per list, what were the designs of the lists. So each list was associated with a word that was not presented in the list. That's an important component of the design. And then again, other details that you can find in this method section information here. So for example, how are the lists presented? They're presented, using PowerPoint, using a screen, pencil and paper to write down the information. That's all stimulus and apparatus. All right, and then the procedure. So for the procedure, we need to know, how do we use all of this ingredients? How do we put all of this together? So we presented 15 words. There were 15 words per list. How long were the words presented for? Those details are available. They were presented for 2 seconds per word. That needs to be known, Because if you want to redo this experiment, do you put the words up for 2 seconds each, 5 seconds each, one at a time, all at the same time? How do you do the experiment? So word presentation duration, your recall duration is another part of the procedure. So it was 2 minutes for recall. During recall, you were allowed to write the words in any order that you wanted. You also had to rate your confidence level during recall. So for this one, anything that you could not or probably would not know is going to be in the method section information. So 2 seconds per word, 2 minutes for recall. Other things, though, you're going to draw on your own experience in the experiment. And basically, you want a step-by-step outline of what it is that a subject goes through in this particular experiment. So subjects were split up into either singles, groups of 2 or groups of 3. Groups of 2 and groups of 3 were allowed to work together. They had to come up with the same lists. Subjects completed the recall period after every single list. So always, when you're writing the method section, one thing that can help you is try to think of ways that somebody could do it wrong based on the information that you gave them. So think about it in terms of, we presented all 6 lists. We know what that means, right? We did each list one at a time. It could be, on the other hand, somebody says, oh, you presented all 6 lists, so I'll just present all 6 lists and then do the recall period at the end of it. So try to critically look at it and think of yourself and think of, could I do something wrong here and still follow the method section to the letter? That'll help you a lot in the procedure section. So, words were presented one at a time for 2 seconds. Recall occurred after every list. Things like that, phrases like that will really help you out to writing that section. All right, so that's what you need to include. Again, 3 major sections: subjects, apparatus and materials, and then your 3rd section is your procedure. What should you not include? So one clear defining line about what not to include is anything that occurred after this slide. So you have the entire experimental slides available to you. Once it occurred, once this end of the experiment occurred, that was when we did the scoring and analysis. So the scoring and analysis was where we said, okay, here are the right answers, count up how many right ones you got, add up your confidence level for all of those, write those down on that little piece of paper. That all occurs after the experiment. That is not part of the procedure. So we don't include that. Basically, once that final recall period was done, once list 6 was presented and your 2 minutes expired for writing down your words and confidence levels, that's where your method section ends. So none of the scoring and analysis, so make sure that at no point do you say, after this point, Dr. each of you put the correct answers on the board. We all counted up how many right and how many incorrect. That does not belong in the method section. That happens after the experiment. The method section is, what is the experiment? All right, any questions so far on content? Yep.
Would the scoring analysis, would that count as like the first test for the method section?
That's actually part of the results section. So that has to do with how you scored the different measures that we had, and that will come up in the results section. In the results section, right at the beginning, we'll say something like, we scored memory recall as the total number of words that were recalled divided by, the number of words that were recalled divided by the total number of words. Like we'll explain that, but that goes in the results section. So it is part of the overall write-up, but it's just not part of the method section. All right, any other questions on the content? Yep.
So in the method section, I know there weren't some classes just singles. Should we write some classes were singles, others we were split in groups, or should we just include what happened with this class?
You should definitely mention that subjects were divided into singles, pairs, and groups of 3. we can leave out that, some classes were all singles. Mostly because that would get really messy to write up, because other classes were either pairs or pairs and leftover singles, or groups of three and leftover pairs. So it just gets messy. But it's the truth that subjects in general were divided. So we're not gonna lie, and it is the truth that subjects were divided into working alone, working in a pair, working in groups of three. But that's a kind of line where it's too much detail, and it's not necessary in this situation. And I will let you guys know exactly how to make that decision in just a little bit. All right, anything else about the content? Yep.
What is this doing?
That's up on the slide, but we got plenty of time. And it's, it's about 2 pages long. All right, so that was a content requirement. What we're going to do now is the APA requirements. So the APA sections that we're going to include in this, and this is from your textbook. This is in the appendix, the writing appendix. Those pages, depending upon how your e-text is paginated, might be different, but that heading is the heading that you're looking for. So if you go to the appendix and you just kind of look at the headings, look for the one that says formatting your report. We're going to be including aspects from that in this first draft. And formatting your report covers things like, this is the font you should use, this is the size of the font, this is the margins that you should use. Organization of the report, we're going to stick to the part that is about the method section. This is basically going to reiterate what I just told you about the subjects, stimulus and apparatus, and procedures. But again, it's a second place to get that information. It's a second look on it. It's not going to contradict anything that I mentioned. So it's a nice way to sort of bulk up your understanding of what goes into these particular sections. This is the big sort of like APA one that we're going to focus on, and it's the use of headings. So in this report, let's go back to the use of headings. Whoops, there we go. We have a level 1 heading. That is the method section. And in that we have subheadings. Those are level 2 headings. That is subjects, level 2 subheading, stimulus and apparatus, final level 2 subheading, procedure. So these level subheadings, you can think of it, if you've ever heard of those really complex contracts where people are like, well, if you look at section 4, subsection A, subparagraph B8, well, your APA research paper is organized in the same way, and it does it with the use of headings. So take a look at this, and take a look at your one sample paper. It's got nice information about how to format your headings. Basically, your major headings, your level 1 headings, they are centered and bold. Your level 2 headings, they are flush left, bold, and I believe capitalized. So those are the ones that you're going to need for this. So make sure that you format those correctly. And importantly, do not look at your published papers for this, because their APA formatting for publication is not the same as the APA formatting that we're using for manuscript submissions. So just be aware of that. You can see a very nice graphic in those pages that'll illustrate what bold paragraph form, flush left looks like. So make sure that you format your headings according to APA style. And then we're not going to use extensive citing and referencing of sources, because most of this is our work. We designed this experiment, we put it together, we did all of that. The one thing though that we will cite is Roediger and McDermott, because we use their lists. So when you mention the lists, when you say we used 6 lists, be sure that you mention, and these came from Roediger and McDermott, 1995. Because if we cite Roediger and McDermott, then we're being good scientists. It's actually a lot better if there's an established stimulus or an established procedure, that you use that procedure in your experiments. So the fact that we used these very famous lists in our experiments means that we can very easily compare our results to anybody else that uses these lists. So it's actually oftentimes a very good idea to use the same stimuli that other people use in order to make your experiments directly comparable. However, if we don't cite them, then we're thieves, and we want to be scientists, not thieves. So we give them the credit. They came up with the list, so we cite those. So make sure that you cite that correctly. So check for citing and referencing sources. Basically, just the last names, no titles. If it's in text, use an and. If you have the whole thing in parentheses, use an ampersand. But definitely just check for citing two author papers. Well, there you go, two authors, and that's on page 333. Again, your pages might be different. Check out the citing and referencing sources. All right, in terms of formatting your report, this is the big stuff you need to know. It's going to be double-spaced. So when you're doing your Word document, make sure that you go into that paragraph editor and make sure that it's double-spaced. If you don't know how to do that, highly recommend just go to Google, go online, double-space in Word. It'll show you how to do that, or whatever Word, text program you're using. Times Roman 12-point font, not Calibri. Calibri is the default for Word. Word used to default to Times New Roman. It does not any longer. Make sure you're using Times. There should be a new in there. Times New Roman 12-point font. Make sure your margins are 1 inch all around. So format your page, 1 inch margins all around. And that is basically how you format it to look. So this is actually due October 9th. And please submit this on time. So you are invited to be part of the peer review for this draft. Peer review is where your peers, fellows in your class, are going to anonymously look over your drafts and give you feedback. I introduced this a couple of years ago, and the increase in quality in the final research paper has been phenomenal. So this is a very important aspect that you are going to be involved in, but it needs to be submitted on time to be guaranteed to be included in the peer review process. If you submit it late, you might be included, you might not. All right, there's an algorithm that we're going to do this through Turnitin. There's an algorithm that Turnitin uses to assign reviews. If you get it in on time, you are guaranteed to be assigned reviews. If you get it in late, you might not be assigned in the peer review. And again, if you would like to get peer reviewed and earn the points that come with peer review, you're invited to submit that on time. All right, so make sure by October 9th at 11 p.m. you got your draft in. And your completed method section will be approximately 2 to 3 pages. You're looking for 2 and a little bit. That's usually what I find to be that sweet spot. And this is going to be your guiding light in terms of how much detail to put in there. So I wish there was hard lines that I could tell you, more hard lines that I could tell you, like after the slide that says end of the experiment, don't put any more stuff in your method section, right? That nothing after that occurs. In reality, the amount of information you put into a method section is a little fuzzy, right? And you can go overboard. You can put in too much, and all of a sudden your method section is talking about every single detail. What shirt was the professor wearing? What was the temperature in the room at that time? How many people were wearing jackets? How many people weren't wearing? I mean, that's part of the experiment, right? That's part of what happened. Or you could go too far on the other side. And you could say things like, well, lists were shown, people responded, experiment done. So as you write more of these, you'll get an intuitive feel. You'll kind of build an inner evaluator that will say, yeah, this is important information, this is not important information. When you're starting out, you don't have that kind of internal compass. So this is your internal compass. You want approximately 2 to 3 pages. So what I suggest is, on your first pass through on this, write everything that you think should go into the method section. Write the method section to the best of your ability. Here's the subject. Here's all the apparatus. Here's the procedure. Here's the step-by-step method that everybody went through. We split into groups. The lists were shown at the end of every single list. We did recall. At the same time, we did confidence levels as well. Write it out the way that you think is enough information. If you come in under 2 pages, and I mean a healthy 2 pages, like 1 full page and basically a second full page. If you don't reach that, if you come in like a page and a half, definitely if you come in only at a page, you don't have enough information. That's your signal to put more details in. So go back through and say, well, maybe I should tell them about this. Maybe I'll elaborate a little bit more on this detail over here. If you come in under 2 pages, that's your indication that your internal compass is pointing a little bit too much towards not enough information. You got to put in a little bit more information. If, on the other hand, you go beyond 3 pages, you put in too much. Probably you put in too much information. So go back and think, what can I cut out? What isn't really necessary to get it down to about 2.5 pages? So as long as your style isn't overly flowery or verbose, 2 pages is kind of that sweet spot. So 2 to 2.5 is what you're looking for. Let that be your guiding light on this. That only works though if it's double spaced times Roman 12-point font, 1-inch margins all around. So make sure that you have that set up going in. And again, this method section will be handed in and it will be anonymously peer reviewed. And it'll be peer reviewed for both content and APA style requirements. Anonymously only works if you don't put your name anywhere on the document. So when you hand it in, I will know which document goes with which students, so I can grade your drafts. But let's keep it as anonymous as possible for the peer review process. Please don't have your name anywhere on that. We're going to submit that using Turnitin, and I'll give you details on that, how to sign up for that, and basically how to submit and make sure that you're in the right section. All right, any questions on the method section? We're not going to have a whole lot of time to take a look at experimental procedure. We'll do that next time. But any questions on the method section, just to make sure everybody can get started. All right. So last thing I'll mention about this is sometimes when people are writing the method section, and it's the first thing that we're writing, sometimes it's hard to know how to start. How do we do this? How do we write stuff? And one of the things that you can use to guide you, not in terms of APA style, but definitely in terms of maybe like phrasing or content, is other people's reports. So feel free, for example, for your subject section, feel free to go to Roediger and McDermott and look at experiment number 1 and look at how they phrased their subjects. And they probably said something like, we ran 248 subjects, 47 females, 201 males who participated as part to earn course credit at the University of Michigan. All subjects were naive to the purposes of the study. Feel free to do that and say, all right, well, I'll mention the number of subjects first, and then how many males and how many females, and then that they did it for P211, and then that they came from IUSB. Feel free to use the articles that you found for your library assignment as a guide, especially if you're kind of stuck on phrasing or you don't know how to, put this in or whatever. Feel free to do that. Make sure that you remember your plagiarizing training. You can't take direct, phrases, but you're going to have to change the information anyway. So definitely feel free to use the structure that they provide. All right. So any questions on that? About what needs to be done? All right, and I'll have details on Turnitin later.